What the Heck is your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 tithe counters. I'm Phil. With me as always is Davy, and we have a special guest today, the terror of some of the online clashes, Tommy Conboy. How you doing, Tommy?
Yeah, I'm good, guys. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well.
Real solid. Not working this weekend like you are, so I get that.
Got to rub it in there.
I know.
Yeah. So the reason that we've got Tommy on today, we're talking Kainan's Reapers, and we've seen some success from Tommy's decks. We wanted to pick his brain a little bit, see if he had some good ideas that we could share with you folks. To give you a little bit of context before we dig in, though, just so you know, when we're recording, the Elthane's Soul Raid have just gone on pre-order. So those will be coming out about a week after we record this, which is probably about when this will drop. So yeah, and so we've got our standard topic here before the main topic with community shoutouts. As a guest, Tommy, do you have any community content creators or anything that you would like people to know about?
I think, given that it's coming to its conclusion, I've got to give a shout out to Frederick, who's just been running the German team championship, or WTC, GTC, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's been an awesome tournament, and I think it's something he runs every year. It's not something I've managed to be a part of due to it usually being held in Germany, but with it being held online, it's been awesome. So yeah, shout out to him for running such a big event.
Cool.
Yeah. I got to do an online team event. We actually we were on the other side of the teams from each other in the semis, but you and I were both warming the bench at the time. So in that sense, you and I got to play each other at when they battle or Path to Glory did theirs. But this looked like a real big event. Did you get to fully compete there? You had a team, or were you in as a solo?
Both.
Oh, all right. Why not both?
Actually, yeah. I got knocked out of finished, I think it was in the round of 16. Round of 32, I can't remember. I get beat by Nebul and his Mollog. That was a solo one. And yeah, I've been a proud member of Team Steve.
Yeah.
And really luckily we've just won the final. So
all right.
Times.
Congrats.
Very nice.
Awesome.
Thank you.
We'll have to maybe see if they continue to do an online format. Maybe we'll have to come back with the team next year. But anything that you'd like to shout out, Davey?
Yeah, there's a Battle for Salvation. Warhammer Underworlds podcast has finally returned. They dropped, I think, episode 36 and 36 and a half. And they got Matt on to talk, go back and talk Kagras. And that's especially interesting because he's been working them for a while. He's got a Road to the Grand Clash series that he's doing. And so it's kind of neat to hear his thoughts about the evolution of that and all that sort of thing. And he does have a cool channel for that too. So
Sweet.
Yeah. So I just wanted to give them, they're back in all their glory. Actually, again, I think I've said this before about one of their podcasts, but if the only thing you do is go and listen to the first 4 minutes, Max Bernstein has a musical number for you right at the start. So all your old favorites are back with, Randall chiming in, Max's music, Max never meaning a joke that he didn't feel like he needed to explain. All that good stuff's in there. So
Wouldn't want it any other way.
Back. Exactly.
Awesome. Well,
what about you, Phil? You got anything?
So this week, Wathlab 4 Dwarves and a Bear on the Vassal Discord dropped I guess an objective placement guide, I guess you would call it. Some just general strategy about board placement and token placement. It's on a Reddit post, but it's linked in the Vassal Discord. If you're in there, you can go check it out. Has some really interesting insight, specifically from all of his time playing the Chosen Axes and some of the extremes that he's had to go to figure out ways to gain advantages while playing Chosen Axes. But I think all of the things that he mentions for objective placement are thoroughly valuable no matter what warband you're playing, because if you're not playing objectives yourself, you might be playing into objectives, and just getting in that headspace I think is valuable, and thinking more critically about your board choice, board placement, and objective placement. So I felt like that was a really cool article. Went into some pretty good detail with lots of Vassal screenshots of like all the different possible ways you could configure the board.
Yeah, it
for
was
your
great.
benefit.
And like you say, it's I think it's one of those things. It's the right content and the right format. Like the
Yep.
visual format that he's able to put it in. Really got a lot out of it. So we'll link it in the show notes. It's a little tricky to find if you're not used to rolling around on Reddit. So
Yeah,
but
I know I'm not.
you got anything else? Or we?
I guess I will just give a quick shout out just to the Set the Tempo blog. Continuing to have a number of good articles, things that are not sort of the standard fare, which I find refreshing. I think most recently was one about just
It was like making sure both you and your opponent were having like
yeah. I want to. The thing that comes to mind was like saying like an etiquette thing, but it's not exactly that. But yeah, it's basically trying to make sure that both you and your opponent are having a good game. And I just thought, I mean, it's like it's not the kind of thing that you normally see. So I thought it was a nice change of pace, and I appreciate that. So go check those out. Our hobby sort of corner here, quick. Tommy, what have you been doing in the hobby lately? What the hex is going on with you?
In the hobby, not much lately, apart from just making sure I keep up with buying all the releases as quickly as they're coming out.
I feel that.
Yeah, I had the sad moment of having to decide that it was taking up too much space, so I had to go for a different kind of way of storing all my minis. So I had to get rid of all the small boxes, which broke my heart. But yeah, other than that, I'm not much of a painter, so I haven't been doing any of that lately. But I'll need to get back on it before long.
When you don't have to play in person, I mean, why bother, right?
Yeah, to be fair, I'm known for rocking up to tournaments with unpainted models. I'm quite infamous for it.
It all works, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's not required by, at least officially, by GW. So no hate. Whatever works for everybody. Davy, anything going on with you?
Mostly assembly lately for me. I think I already mentioned I finished off my Chosen Axes and Steel Hearts to really get those meta warbands ready. And then assembling the Kainan's Reapers last night. I was enjoying that while I was editing the previous episode, which actually probably is just dropped. I think now that I think about 12 hours before we recorded this. So in our usual desperate attempt to try and keep pace, but I really enjoyed putting. They got some cool poses there. That was pretty fun. And Kainan's big axe is pretty awesome. So yeah. What about yourself?
I've been mostly busy with doing things with our other podcast. So we just have our Soulblight Gravelords episode going up soon. I think Monday, which is after we're recording right now. I guess that probably doesn't mean much to people who are listening, but soon. And then we will be recording for the Broken Realms Kragnos very soon. And then we'll also have to be doing a recording for the new Dominion box for Age of Sigmar, which I am probably going to be recording on that as well. So Pretty busy there. I did manage to put a little bit more paint on my stalkers, but have been pretty slow at that. So maybe they'll be done before I use them in person again. We'll see.
Yeah, well, and that's a cool thing for us. If you're local to our Madison area, our local Warhammer store is getting ready to do in person events. The vaccination rates in Dane County are great, and so if you feel safe, I think that's going to be happening in our area real soon. So, but most of you aren't in Madison. Most of you are here to hear about Kainan's Reapers. So.
Yeah. So today we are going to run down a little bit differently than normal. So we will talk about the fighters and like general play styles, but then we've got some decks that we've put together. I have one that I built that Davy and I sort of tested to figure out how these guys might work, and then obviously, like we said, we got Tommy here with his deck that has had some success, and we'll sort of pick his brain about why he picked what he picked, and maybe it'll give you some ideas of how you can build a deck and run the Reapers for yourself. So let's kick things off with the core mechanics of this warband. Tommy, would you like to run us through some of their unique mechanics that people should be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. The one that shines more than any, of course, is the Mortec Advance. That's what makes them kind of individual. So it's kind of like Scurry for goblins, but much more aggro based. So let me see where I find it. So for those who don't know, it's a reaction after this fighter's move action. This fighter being any of the Mortecs other than Arcenta. Choose one friendly Mortec that has no move or charge tokens. The chosen fighter makes a move action that must end adjacent to this fighter. So they've almost got a kind of conga line ability, which is quite cool and really useful, especially when playing aggro, I've found.
And so you mentioned it there, but so this reaction can react to itself, and you can pull a whole bunch of these guys along if you want to, right?
Yeah, exactly. So long as you can't start the chain with Kenta, even though Kenta's a Mortec himself. But if you start the chain with any of the other Mortecs, you can basically move every single model that isn't Kainan, so long as you finish the reaction chain with Kenta. You get 5 moves, or even you can react after the move action as part of a charge action, and potentially have full supports in the middle of a charge action when nobody was near the target at the beginning of the activation, which is really fun.
Yeah. That opens up a lot of different things, and I feel like that has been and I guess like you said, this is sort of the thing that makes him go, but no pun intended. But is the sort of the main driver of the warband is that you can really take advantage of positioning because you can set up all of your attacks with support, which is pretty fun. So then I guess the other Mortec thing that's going on here is the Naderite weapons. And this pairs pretty well with the Mortec Advance in that when a Mortec with Naderite, which is all of them except for Hackor, have support, then when they roll the associated number of supports, they get +1 damage. So, for instance, if you have one supporting fighter and you roll a single support in your attack and it's successful, you'll have +1 damage. If you have double supports, then either support rolls will give you +1 damage. And I think, in my experience, that's been a way to get some sneaky damage from some of these smaller fighters, especially since you can sort of force supports with Mortec Advance. Any other thoughts with Naderite?
Well, let me ask you this: how like it feels like something you don't ever count on. It feels like an occasional handy bonus, but one of those things where if I'm on the other side, I'm worried. It's more of like a head game. Like if I'm using these guys, I'm not counting on it going off. But if I'm on the other side, I'm worried that it will go off. is how I've seen it. How much of a role have you felt like it's played in your games, Tommy?
I think it's more dependable than people give it credit for. It's between Mortec Advance, Netherite, and some of the cards that give you plus, like just the picking one out of the deck here, like Strength of the Swarm, +1 dice,
Mm-hmm.
+1 damage if you have the supports. If you
Mm-hmm.
can get to that kind of sweet spot of 3 dice, you've got a 70% chance of rolling a support. So it's just reasonably high. Like, so it's not going to happen every time, but you can depend on it. It's going to happen more often than not.
Yeah,
And
I guess. Yeah, I mean, people like Fighter's Ferocity, right? So
Yeah.
this
yeah,
It's
is
the same math.
yeah,
And like, right, I don't think you use it if you're like, I need to get exactly 2 damage and I need the Nadirite to make it happen. But if you're like planning charges anyway and you're just needing to make attacks, hey, if I can make this do 2 damage, then why not? I've also found that with Kenta, you can almost guarantee that it's going to happen just because he has reach 2. So I think it sort of depends on who you're using it with as well as to how reliable you want it to be, because you do have to have those supports set up, and it's much easier to have supports with a range 2 attack than a range 1.
sure. Um, I think the only other mechanic that we didn't hit here was the whole tithe counter thing. That's their inspiration, so you got to get to 3 tithe to inspire. Uh, you can only be collecting tithe if you have one or both of Kainan or Kenta out there, and they don't really go anywhere. They just kind of float. But then there's things you can spend them on as well. But since we're already talking about fighters, should
Yeah.
we jump in? Who do you feel like there's? I mean, Kanan's the big sort of flashy guy. Do you think he's the linchpin, or do you feel like that goes somewhere else, or is it not as simple as that?
I think with Kainan, it's weird. There's different ways you can build Warband. You can focus a lot more heavily on Kainan, and then possibly try and play a kind of hold objective style with the rest of the Warband. I don't think that's the strongest way for them to go, but it's certainly more capable of dealing with passive opponents. But their strength is definitely in having Kainan there as a kind of a distraction or just a big target or just something that can deal with hordes with his scything attack. But
Mm-hmm.
then if you've got the right cards and you've got the right build for dealing with elite fighters, the Mortecs are incredible at taking down four-wind models, even
Yeah.
more so than Kainan, I would say.
As far as distinguishing the Mortex, what Phil was saying. So the things you got to remember is uh, Hackor is the one without Nadirite, and Kenta is the one who has to finish a chain. He can't continue a chain with the advance. But do you find them having particular roles? You got Kenta, Hackor, Noham, Karo, Senha. Um, anything in particular, like this is what this guy's best for? Here's who I put forward first. Here's who I try to keep alive. That sort of thing.
So Hakor goes forward first. I find that because he's got the 2 damage on the fighter card, people tend to think that he's the one to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, he's actually the one that probably gains the least from inspiring. So he's just one that you want to charge in early, try to get the damage out if you can, and then when you're going for the tithe counters, if you're going for inspire, then the other fighters gain a lot more from it. So I'd say Hakor's definitely the one that goes up front. And
Yeah,
then,
is it the only thing he picks up is cleave, if I remember right? He's
yeah,
That
that's
is
it.
correct.
okay.
Yeah,
Almost nothing. In
Yeah.
some matchups that is nothing, but yeah.
yeah. And in most
Yeah.
cases, if you're going for the supports and the extra dice and damage, like cleave will
Yeah.
always be helpful, but not so much
Sure.
when you've got so many supports.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, on the flip, who do you feel like gains the most out of inspiration?
Uh, I'd say potentially either Karu or Know Him.
Mm.
Know Him because that ranged attack becomes very strong if you're managing to keep fighters alive.
Mm-hmm.
Know him because the additional damage, the knockback, and the additional shield. They quickly manage to find damage just from nowhere. Like, they look like little
Yep.
1 damage fighters, and then next minute you've got 1 upgrade on them, and they're knocking you back into lethals, and they've done 4 damage.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
don't
That
need a lot.
knockback is
Yeah,
often like a stealth damage buff because it's hard to really position yourself. Everyone's used to not standing next to lethals, but it's a little harder to not stand in a line 2 away from them.
yeah.
I think what I like. So Senha is the other fellow with a shield. He does go up to 2 block, which actually we shouldn't understate. I feel like the whole warband being on 1 block is to start is actually pretty decent.
Certainly better than 1 dodge.
Yeah, yeah. But the 2 block is a lot, and then because he goes to 3 fury, he has that many more dice to pick up a crit if you have an objective that's looking for that, or have a chance at getting the supports. Although the range 1 makes that a little challenging, but that's pretty handy too.
Yeah, Senna's
Yeah.
definitely one you don't want to put too many, unless you've not got any other choice. Senna's not the ideal one to put upgrades on because Senna doesn't gain as much from the extra dice, obviously being
Mm.
less accurate with Fury.
Sure, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
But yeah, it's not a bad option if you've lost a few others. So
Yeah.
I feel like
Go ahead.
pretty much all of the Mortex are okay. Hackor, like you said, is definitely the worst. And you probably don't really stack upgrades on Noam either, just because most of the upgrades don't affect range 3. So you're just relying on him to just take pot shots where you can.
yeah, but if you get if you're running Glory Seeker or anything like
Right. Yeah, you
that,
can do that too. Make him all of a sudden shooting for 3 damage on
yeah,
a support. And it's sneaky easy to get supports when you can shoot from 3 away. So that suddenly becomes surprise a bit of extra damage.
mm-hmm. Know him works especially well with some of the warband specific upgrades that they've got, but of course we can leave that until we actually talk about them later.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll call them out when we get there. Do you want to? Anyone got anything else to say about the fighters, or should we jump into the cards here?
I guess just for folks who maybe don't know, we'll just quick rundown. All of the Mortex, well, except for Kenta, all the like base Mortex, they all start at 3 move, 1 block, 2 life, and so they're not exactly fast, and you do have to be careful about them getting blown up. Like, don't be too crazy aggressive if you know your opponent's going to be aggressive. Like, just be smart about it, because you can bleed a lot of glory with 4 2-wound fighters that are going to be giving up primacy and stuff.
Fair enough. And then see what you do to mitigate that in the cards here. So, should we push into objectives here?
Let's do it.
Sure.
All right. So, Tommy, you sent us a copy of your deck. We've got it up here, but you want to start maybe work through your surges, or however you could even do kind of the if you prefer a different format, whatever thought process you use to kind of get there. If you think there's cards that group together nicely.
I think splitting them into surges and end phase is probably the easier way
Sure.
to follow.
I'm looking right at the top with the surges. The very first one listed here is restricted, and that's Scrum. And I put that in. I know Phil, or I didn't put that in. If people haven't noticed, I don't consider myself much of a deck maker. I'm more a deck stealer and then play with, but should do something about that at some point. Anyway, Scrum I'd been playing with in some other factions. This one, it just like happens. Like it's built to go with that Mortec Advance, right?
Yeah, Scrum's just a given in most games, unless you draw it at the very end of the game, which would be unlucky. You're scoring for doing exactly what you would want to do anyway. So it pretty much
Yeah,
goes without saying, even as a restricted slot, it's just too easy.
yeah. And I think I know that the last game Phil and I played, I I had that in the opening hand, and just to get some seed glory, I think I walked a vulnerable fighter backwards to get scrum on my first activation, uh, and then trigger. So it was available there mostly because I knew, or it felt like Phil was going to be coming at me, so I could delay a little bit before committing and get. So it was nice that it could either be like passive, you know, pre-engagement glory or glory that's going to trigger as you're going in. So what else? What else do you have for surges there?
So I've got Show of Force, which is probably actually the weaker, or one of the weaker ones in there. It can be very easy, kind of mid to late game when you've had a chance to start running more tech in, or when you've had a chance to put some upgrades on Kainan or Kenta. First
Mm-hmm.
activation of the first round, it might be a wee bit weaker unless you've maybe got some other cards, but it's still a reasonably easy surge. Got Gruesome Certainty in here, which is just roll a critical strike or a critical success,
Right.
or a critical hit.
And
So
yeah,
yeah. So that's
and I think we see later you've got a lot of ways of adding dice into there. So I think that's a nice just be going about your business and happen to score this sort of thing.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
With these guys, their strength isn't just killing things. So you want to attack all the time. So if you're attacking all the time, you're going to get a crit at some point. So again, it's
Sure.
another surge that just scores because you're doing exactly what you want to be doing in the first place.
Right. And I guess I mentioned the extra dice, but it's not just that. You've got a lot of ways we'll see of generating more attacks. So more dice and more attacks all combined to give you more chances to score this one.
Yeah, exactly. And next up, Pride of the Emissarian Caste. That's a surge for Kainan himself holding an objective in enemy territory. I mean, he doesn't need to charge on it like Bold Conquest. Just move him on there and score.
Sure.
Yep.
And then he's ready to start swinging up. That's so easy. Some players are good at making that difficult for you. Ones that kind of catch on where you're going to place Kainan and try to kind of keep objectives in awkward places for you, so you're not in a good spot if you move on to one. But even with that, it's just a generally easy one glory.
Yeah, I think his range too really helps there as well because he can kind of control a lot of space with wherever he ends up. So there's only so much they can do to mitigate with placing them awkwardly.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing that I found is that, like, if you know you're running this, you can place an objective in a place that makes it easy to score, and then your opponent either has to come and stand on that objective that you put very close to the front lines, or they leave it for you. And both things are fine in your opinion, because if somebody comes and stands on it, then you can go chop them, and if they don't, then you can go stand on it. So I think that one's good.
Do you find yourself with the bandwidth to be able to do that during objective placement, Tommy, or are you usually prioritizing other things when you're placing?
I like to keep, because of the amount of siding going on, the extra attacks, like the fact I'm looking to attack as often as possible. I try to keep objectives as grouped up as possible, so there's normally always options available. It just becomes difficult if you run into some kind of feed the beast grave stuff. They start removing objectives.
I mean,
But there's not
that
much
makes everything with objectives difficult.
Yeah. Thankfully, the rest of the deck doesn't really depend on objectives at all.
Sure, that's about the only one. You got something new in here from I think this is the most recent pack here. Everything to prove. What are your thoughts on that one?
That's an awesome card. So good. I could see that being restricted at some point. I imagine. I can't see a situation where you wouldn't run that card. Maybe if you're playing Rippers or something, it's quite awkward with Primacy, but any warband with a 2 model fighter runs that card. Or just any warband that is planning on gaining the Primacy token and has some kind of quarry tech in the deck. You're going to score it at some point, without doubt. It's just really good.
it was one of those kind of a double take when I first saw it. It's both sides of it are definitely achievable. Some warbands can get it both ways, and whatever warband you're getting can probably get it one of them. So um, I think that only leaves one left. Tithe Masters, is that correct?
Yeah, Tide Masters was nice. It's
Yeah.
not the strongest one in there, but it's quite reliable because it doesn't matter if you're up against an elite warband or a horde warband. If it's an
Mm,
elite one, then it's essentially kill one fighter. If it's a horde warband, kill two fighters. And thankfully, with a couple of the other cards in there, you can make it a bit easier to score as well. You can even score it without killing any fighters if you're lucky enough.
sure. You put them in
Yeah.
a bad spot as far as deciding on a card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Phil, Phil has in his deck, and I know that you did. Here's two to consider. There was a Perfect Strike and Impending Doom. It looks like you've rotated those out. So what are your thoughts on those? You must have played them for a while and then decided they weren't making the cut.
Perfect Strike is great because you're trying to gain so many supports that chances are you're rolling mostly successes. Getting the exact damage with Netherite can be a little tricky sometimes, and it's just that I put it in there because it's just alpha as hell. It's just fun
Yeah,
to try and achieve it, but I found myself going out my way a wee bit more than I should to try and score it rather than just taking a one
sure.
glory objective and just playing kind of a lot more naturally.
And you're saying that Netherite, the problem there is that you sometimes accidentally do too much damage when you roll that single support.
Yeah,
All of a sudden you
yeah,
spike your damage where you didn't mean to.
yeah. It's not a good place when you're re-rolling successes to try and not get extra damage.
How can I do less damage?
Yeah.
Yeah, I included it mostly just because I was curious to see how reliable it would be. Because on the face of it, it does kind of feel unreliable. But I thought, like you said, with all the supports, it might not be too bad. Um, but yeah, in my playtests, it did feel like you were really having to think a lot about how you were going to go about attacking and who you were attacking with on whom, and that probably is maybe a little bit too micromanagey and like is a little unreliable. It might be making you do suboptimal things just to try and score this. So I would probably take it out as well, but I have had success with it. I don't think I've had a game where I didn't score it. So um I don't know. It's more reliable than I thought it would be.
I guess the other thing that kind of messes with it a little bit is those narrow escape Rippas or the uh, Berserk
Right.
Fortitude, and those are both war bands that pop up from here and there. But yeah, a two surge that happens for aggro is pretty rare. So definitely worth looking. The other one was Impending Doom, and this is the have end activation with two friendlies next to an enemy. What rotated that out for you, or was that kind of a judgment call?
I found that early game it can be reasonably easy. Mid to
Mm-hmm.
late game it starts becoming much more difficult, and I found more often than not I was choosing not to charge but to move just so I could score Impending Doom.
Mm.
Hmm.
And
Oh, because
yeah,
you were worried about killing the fighter too early, and then
yeah, exactly. The warband's just too good at killing things
I'm
if they're
just
in
too
range.
good.
Ah,
I'd say honestly, when it comes to annihilating the opponent, this warband's probably one of the best. So trying to have two fighters left standing next to one
Mm.
isn't always a given.
Well, that would explain why you have
yeah.
Annihilation in here. No, just kidding.
I was
Uh,
tempted, I really was, but no.
It,
you
I was
do
gonna say,
have something close here. You have absolute dominance, and that's one point where yours differs from Phil. You have absolute dominance, which is three glory for just one left alive and at least two of your own. Phil's got demolish the opposition, which is the hybrid. which says you can score it just with one left alive, or if they don't have anyone in their own territory, if no enemies in enemy territory. Did you consider demolish? And if you did, what made you break for absolute dominance instead?
It's definitely a coin flip kind of choice. The reason I went for absolute dominance instead of demolish was the fact that I could score it in the second round rather than the third.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Against warbands like maybe Wormspat or just kind of strong three fighter warbands, being able to score absolute dominance in the second round before they start wiping you out can be make a big difference. But yeah, demolish the opposition is probably more consistent as far as being
Sure.
able to score.
That's a good point. I see. I see those three fighter war bands as they start pouring the upgrades on whoever's got the inured to pain or whatever that you're not going to take out. They start pouring more upgrades, and you can pick off the other ones, and you gotta get in ahead of the rest. So that's a good point. Um, do you have any thoughts on that, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same thought process for me in that I felt like demolish the opposition is a little more reliable. Um, in case you have like a really bad game, you could theoretically still score it without having gotten an appropriate number of kills. But it is third end phase, so if you draw it too early, that can also slow you down. But I feel like one three glory, three third end phase is worth that risk. So I felt I'd give it a try. Um, Seems okay so far. I don't know if I would necessarily stick with it, but
Hmm.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the choice. I think it works.
It's probably more of a kind of rock paper scissors effect. Like demolish the opposition
Right.
will definitely be stronger against like say your Harrows or any passive warband that's sitting back, which is probably a good thing because that's almost probably the main weakness of the Reapers. But yeah, against kind of more aggro based Voltron kind of warbands, it starts becoming a bit more difficult.
Yep.
Um, there's a couple here that are not quite, but almost the same card. That would be Walking Mass Grave and Team Effort. I guess Walking Mass Grave has the advantage that you don't have to have. You can do it with just one person left alive, which is not much of a mass grave, but there you go. Or but Team Effort. I remember being surprised the first time this scored on me. I was like, "What Team Effort? There's like 6 guys in this warband." And then as soon as I thought about it a little longer, I'm like, "Oh, that actually makes a ton of sense." You found these pretty reliable, I imagine. Did you come to them pretty early in your development?
Yeah, maybe not Team Effort, definitely Walking Mass Grave, but then, as you say, they're so similar that Team Effort managed to find its way in there eventually. I find they're
Sure.
almost critical in getting that necessary early glory you need if your opponent's sitting back and waiting on you, and
Yeah.
you're just wanting to advance up. You only need 2 activations to score them, so
Yep.
Right. That's
so
what I
easy.
especially like about them is if you're talking about that sort of passive, somebody sitting back, or you get in that situation where where each side is waiting for the other to commit. You can still score these while waiting to commit. Sometimes I'll have a warband that's got team effort, but in order to do it, I'm having to I got like 3 or 4 guys. I'm already on the second activation. I'm having to decide if I'm pushing forward. You have 6 people, but you can wait until your last 2. So that's real solid.
Yeah. I guess I kind of came to them in the opposite order. I put team effort in right away because I figured I could chain movement and guaranteed that everyone activated. And then, strangely enough, I was waiting on walking mass grave because I didn't necessarily always want to have to move my fighters. I could, like with team effort, you can score it by just having people make attacks without having to move. So if you're already in position, whereas with walking mass grave, if you're already in position, now suddenly you're going to have to move your guys around and you might not want to. But I figured after a while thinking about it, it's easy and there's nothing your opponent can do about it. So it's sort of silly not to take it.
Another kind of auto one you have in here is an intimidating display. That feels pretty reliable to you.
Yeah, it's auto score against anyone that's not running a kind of big boy warband, and even against your Rothgon or Mollog, so long as you're going into enemy territory, then you're probably going to score. I'd say Mollog is probably the more difficult one because you don't want to give them too many targets.
Sure.
But Mollog ruins everything, so there's no point in thinking
And
about
newsflash.
getting up against them.
Let's see. We just got a couple left here. What created for war, that is real juicy. This is score 2 glory in the end phase. We made 4 more attack actions in the preceding action phase. Crucially, including power step, right?
Dirty card.
Yeah. Considering I've got, was it 1, 2, minimum, I'd say 3 bonus attacks just from cards alone, and the fact Kainan is siding.
Yeah.
It can be difficult in some matchups for sure. Again, it's back to this kind of passive weakness. If models are sitting at the back of the board and you can't get to them, then you're not going to be able to attack them. But if you're doing exactly what you want to do, and that's just getting in about it and having a massive scrum of attacks, then yeah, you're going to hit 4, no problem.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that they have a lot of different ways to get there. I guess if you're really in a pinch, then Nohem can help you out, by lobbing shots into the back. So that just leaves clean kills, and this is 2 glory for having fighters out of action with a combined wounds characteristic of 6 or more. There's a lot of objectives out there now that say, they have that look kind of like this. That's they may say like kill 2 and do this thing, or kill 2 and have this other condition met. What landed you on clean kills instead of the rest, and how have you felt about it? I know there's some talk sometimes about counterplay against it. I don't know how realistic that ends up actually being. What's your take on it after running it?
Yeah, it's pretty reliable. You usually manage to kill 2. In a best of 3, yeah, your opponent might start counterplaying it, but what's quite good about that is they don't know what round you're holding it. So if they're trying to counterplay it in round 1 by running through lethals and you're not holding it till round 3, then awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Than what you're looking for. So yeah, it's a bit of a. It's got its own risk, but it's essentially
sure
kill 2 or 3 fighters and score this.
Yeah, it feels a little like Tithe Masters in the sense that because it is the 6 characteristic, 6 wounds combined. It's neither a good into hordes nor a good into elite. Like it has the flexibility to be good in either, and that Tithe Masters kind of has that same vibe as far as that goes, which is nice when you're doing the all comers thing, tournament decks.
Yeah. What's also good is if you run into Mollog, then you can just focus on killing him.
Yeah, sure. It's just that easy. Is that just a quick aside? Is that the way you usually go when you're up against Mollog? Just try and take him down?
Oh yeah, with this deck, yeah, for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think with these guys especially, it's actually doable. Like he's pretty easy to hit, and you get a lot of attacks. So just start piling it on, and you'll get there faster than he'll kill all of your guys probably. Especially with Kainan, he can't kill Kainan.
Maybe.
I mean, it's not a guarantee, but you've got a better chance than just about anybody else, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. I was thinking. I was trying to think who it was. I was talking to somebody the other day who says he managed to do 17 damage to Mollog, and he didn't.
Oh my gosh! Oh no!
He was still alive. So it's like, yeah, some games it doesn't matter how much you pile on, and he's just not going to die.
Oh man!
Yeah.
Wow.
Such is life.
I was wondering if there was like sort of a meta advantage there, where sometimes because there's other warbands who are just like I'm just gonna ignore Mollog. Like I'm not gonna kill him. My only chance is to ignore him. And so wonder if the Mollog decks build enough in, assuming that they're going to be ignored, that they don't have enough to deal with it. But it sounds like at least somebody has enough to deal with a lot of damage. 17. Oh man.
I think there's just so much good healing tech right now that, like, you don't even need to tech that much for Mollog. And I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but he can stay alive and stay healthy without trying that hard, which is frustrating.
That's it. Any other thoughts on the power deck? I'm sorry, objective deck.
Uh, Objectives are quite tricky for them, that's for sure, especially end phase.
Yeah.
They are incredibly strong at aggro into certain matchups, but it is a kind of a rock paper scissors effect for them, where if you come up against Curse sitting on the back, Banshees, Wraith Creepers, then you're gonna have a hard time.
Do you feel like there's a particular opening hand that you hate to see, and maybe matchup dependent, but is there something that you found, one particular card or a couple of cards that have found you forcing yourself into a mulligan, or are you usually able to kind of fight through whatever you draw?
I mean, yeah, well, the worst hand you can get is Created for War, Absolute Dominance, and Clean Kills in the starting hand. There's about for that. You're going to lose 7 glory in a 16 glory deck. I guess it's almost game over before you even started. So,
yeah.
But
Yeah.
other than that, nah, it's not too bad. They can score most things reasonably well, so long as the opponent isn't playing them.
And that gets worse in my deck because Demolish the Opposition, you literally can't score it until the third round. So, yeah, that hand feels real bad.
But they're really awesome at just taking models down really quickly early game if you get the right hands, especially with punching up and strength of the swarm in a starting hand. That's just insane. I think poor Chris, when I was kind of testing them out, tried to play aggro Curse Breakers into them and got annihilated in round 1.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah, they can
Nice.
dish out damage very quickly if you underestimate especially if you underestimate the Mortex.
Yeah, I think that's a real fun aspect of them, is that, like you were saying at the beginning, Kainan is this big scary thing, but there's a whole lot of damage coming from the small guys. And that's a neat warband design that we haven't seen a whole lot of.
Yeah. So you'd mentioned punching up and strength of the swarm, and I think that's a good segue into our gambits here. So I guess maybe give us why those two to start, since you've already mentioned them.
I try to get as much kind of synergy between cards and fighters as I possibly can in a deck. So obviously with the Mortec Advance, getting supports is one of the primary things that they're good at. The fact you've got 2 wound fighters means that punching up is going to be very easy to use. And between those 2 cards, you can be dishing out 4 damage on the first activation with a minimum of 4 dice on the attack as well.
Oh my gosh!
Potentially floated. It can be a massive hit to any warband, especially ones that quite like to have, a kind of big fighter up front doing damage and stuff like that. If someone's playing Wraith Creepers and they're just a wee bit too aggressive with Ripper, then they're going to lose them really quickly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, nice. That's how you get tabled in round 1 with Curse Breakers. That kind of action there. What I like about that is that I think I remember seeing. I think we talked Strength of the Swarm, or a little lukewarm on it, but I like that there's universals out there that are kind of maybe not amazing, except in particular warbands. But this is, I don't know. I like that there's a warband that can leverage that really well. So, yeah, that's pretty cool to see those two get. That's one of those where, like, as those power cards come down, and you're on the other side, your heart just starts sinking. Like, oh man,
man, this is gonna hurt.
I will have to watch these dice roll, but I kind of already know what's gonna happen.
For sure.
Yeah,
You got a couple of let's see, card draw. So we can just mention that real quick. Duel of Wits is in there, but also Unnatural Truce. Do you just find that the power cards are that important? You want to have that extra draw, get you through there. I think Duel of Wits we're seeing just about everywhere, but I know Unnatural Truce is not in the original one you sent us. Just needed that extra little bit.
Yeah, so they are quite, especially early game, they're very dependent on their movement cards. They I run, as you see, Never Falter and Eternal Chase to get them all up to 4 movement, and that
Yep.
can make a huge difference as far as getting models into position for supports or just getting into your opponent's territory so that you can start getting an aggressive second round. So I did try it with one piece of draw tech, but it just wasn't enough. I found it's a bit more reliable for run 2.
Uh, you mentioned your 2 movement ones, the Never Falter, Eternal Chase. How often have you ever been able to use Eternal Chase to kind of lock out the speed package on someone else, or is it you pretty much 99% of the time just using it to boost your own move?
Well, ideally you get both. I have managed to get it a couple of times, because it's especially good round 1, because round 1 you're either using Kainan quite early, you just kind of put him up front and just use him to kind of distract and annoy your opponent. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually, especially if you're up against an aggro warband, they'll line up for that 6 hex charge that's going to score them like 4 or 5 glory.
Mm.
And, yeah, it's brutal if you just like whip Eternal Chase out, and all of a sudden everyone's on 4 movement. You can't score any of your speed package stuff, and not only that, the Mortex are about to come in, and all of a sudden they're within range of multiple fighters. It's a horrible
Yeah.
place for the opponent to be in.
Now, normally a card like this, I'd hold on to. You know, obviously, if they throw down their spectral wings, this is a nice counter drop on that. But if you're playing someone like I don't know the let's say the Grimwatch, do you ever play this like real early just to prevent the bats from getting gathered momentum or something like that, or do you just kind of or maybe later in the game when people have speed upgrades on, play it early to make sure they can't speed package surprise, or do you just tend to hold it, and if they've got it, they've got it?
It really depends on the warband. If I think it's likely to be running the speed package, I'll be more inclined to hold on to it. But I'll
Mm.
never hold on to it and kind of mess up my own plans and what I'm doing. As soon as
Sure.
I'm ready to come in with the Mortex, it'll go down regardless of what my opponent's done. But if I can kind of hold on to it and bait my opponent out with some spectral wings or anything else, then yeah, I'll give it a try.
Looks like you got another positioning one here, center of attention. How did you land on center of attention as opposed to any of the other ones, sidestep or distraction, or is it just the flexibility of that?
Yeah, so I found it's very good for the likes of Scrum, and also very good for lining up some siding attacks with Kainan. But at the same time, it's also just incredibly good for if your opponent's on multiple objectives, then you can usually get it's effectively a double distraction if your positioning is right. So it's yeah, it's harder to use than just a simple distraction, but it can be more rewarding if it's used well. So that's why that
makes sense.
And that
go ahead.
That's one I hadn't considered. I've got Ceaseless Advance just so I could get multiple pushes, but I think you probably have a lot more flexibility with something like Center of Attention.
Ceaseless Advance is awesome. It's a card that's probably number 11 in the deck, and it was in there, I believe, and I took out for Natural Truce. I just found that when I was using it in a lot of games, it didn't have as much of an effect as what I would have liked.
For folks who are just listening, what can you run down Ceaseless Advance real quick?
Oh, yeah, sure. So Ceaseless Advance is basically it's a sidestep where you get to push 2 hexes towards the nearest enemy fighter with 1 Mortec. And then when you play the card, you can discard a number of tithe counters. And for every one you discard, you can push another Mortec 1 hex.
2 hexes. 2 hexes.
2 hex. Well, wait a minute. So you can push 1 friendly Mortec for each tithe counter you discarded, and 1 additional friendly fighter. Oh, they all get to move 2 hexes.
Yeah.
Oh man, I've even been playing that wrong. Okay, so it's even better than I thought. But they do all have to go towards the nearest enemy fighter, so it is aggro only. But I mean, that's pretty much what you're doing here anyway. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a way to move a lot of Mortecs all at once.
It's the new coolest thing for death factions. Just push towards the enemy.
Yeah,
I mean, you a Wraith Creeper or a Reaper.
Keeps them from abusing hold objective stuff. So
Sure.
Or it should. It doesn't though.
It should. Yeah.
We've got 3 left here. We're gonna go. So Jealous Defense. That's a card that, when it gets into the right deck, is real powerful. And is that just because it's so easy to have gotten a fighter positioned onto an objective with one of those Mortec moves?
It's got a million uses in this warband. So it works really well with Kainan and Pride of the Emissary and Cast.
Sure.
Again, it's kind of your opponent feeling comfortable with that 4 fighter model. Next minute you move Kainan within range onto an objective, score Pride of the Emissary and Cast, stick Great Strength on him, and then Jealous Defense, and both their leaders.
Oof. Wow.
So
Yeah.
really nasty if you go that out. But if you're using it with the Mortex, yeah, the fact that you can create that conga line over an objective with one that's just moved rather than charged, and then what you can do is, if you want to be really nasty. So the kind of super combo that you can whip out, and it's good for taking out like big models like your Mologs or Rothcoms, is you can charge in with, say, Hakor. You can move up another fighter just for ease, we'll say Kenta. And Kenta's on an objective. Obviously, everything has to sit really nicely for this to work. You've just done your damage with Hakor, and then you put down Unnerving Synchrony on Hakor, which, just for those that don't know, it's a reaction after an adjacent friendly Mortex attack action, other than a siding action. This fighter makes an attack action. And yeah, that can trigger off of Jealous Defense, so you can get a triple attack down.
Yeah.
Cards.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's got some really kind of horrible uses if you get the right positioning and the right setup.
Yeah, I guess is another one where center of attention can be pretty handy. You can either drag Kainan onto an objective so that he can do that, or do, like you said, Pride of the Emissarian, get him on there, center of attention, and then scything all over everybody. A lot of dramatic plays there. That's cool.
Yeah. Definitely calls back to the just make lots of attacks strategy of being more accurate.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay if you miss once in a while, if you're just throwing 6 or 7 attacks somehow. So Victimize in there, as far as different accuracy boosts that are available, is that you land on that? Is the quarry caveat on that particularly important? This is the +1 dice for range 1 or 2, all the rerolls if the target is a quarry.
That's
I guess
card. There's so many quarry cards going around nowadays with the silent tech, your strength of terror. It's just there's quarry everywhere basically. So it's in the worst case scenario, it's +1 dice, which is still a decent card. But
I totally forgot about Eternal Chase is gonna boost that too, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Yeah.
There's just so many ways in which fighters are becoming quarries that it's almost a given. If you've got a fighter that's doing 3 damage or more, then Victimize is an awesome choice.
Yeah. Saving the best for last, rebounds in here. Are you is it in there as specific tech for something, or is it in there because your fellows are so small, or what's or are you a rebound in all decks sort of guy?
I used to be the latter. I really used to be the latter until I got restricted. Yeah, it was in every single deck. It's more of a kind of tempo booster. It's almost a win more kind of thing, but
Hmm.
it just works really well against some of the problem warbands. I say Moloch or even an enemy like Kainan.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a 1 in 3. Yeah, it might not work. No big deal. It's just a lost gambit if it doesn't work.
Sure.
But the payoff when it does is just huge. It can win games by itself.
Uh-huh.
A prime
Yeah.
example was when Shubi decided he wanted to test Mog into these guys, charged in, got rebounded, was dead the next activation. It just
Good.
completely like turns the tide of a game. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah. Just
it's a nasty cup, but if you can afford to have it in there, then you should.
yeah. Even just going off once in a best of 3 is it's gonna swing that series big time. So
Yeah.
sure.
Or if you're Steve or someone that just rolls crits all the time, you'll just get it 3 for 3.
Yeah. All the crits.
That covers it. Phil, do you have any gambits that you? It looks like you had. Uh, was it methodical assault, acidic strike,
Yes.
commanding stride? Yeah.
So those are the 3 that I had that Tommy didn't. So methodical assault. I mean, I guess I have it in there for 2 reasons. One is just that it gets you an attack again if you failed, which is nice. But it, since it's one of these where it gives your opponent the choice of either they let you make the attack or they give you tithe counters. Sometimes you don't actually get to make the attack you want, which sometimes is nice because then you can score tithe masters off of it. But if you already have scored tithe masters or if you already have a bunch of tithe counters, sometimes that's not great. So mileage may vary with that one, but I like sometimes having that choice, especially early game, because then your opponent's like, well, I don't want you to inspire, but I don't want you to kill my guy. Um, so I don't know. I like putting that on my opponent. Commanding stride. I don't know. Just lots of ways to reposition Kainan when you can push him 3 hexes. Especially when he's got reach 2 and scything, can just put people in a bad spot or they weren't expecting him to suddenly show up and start swinging for the rest of the round. Probably not the best choice, but I think it's funny. And then acidic strike is one where I just wanted to try it. Just because there's so many upgrades right now that people are relying on, having the ability to pull upgrades off. I wanted to see how it would work. So far, the best uses I've found for it are peeling off plus wounds upgrades, just as effectively a plus damage upgrade or a ploy. But I suppose you could also use it to mess with things like Cryptic Companion, or if somebody had an accuracy boost and you knew they needed to make those attacks, you could peel that off. I don't know. I haven't actually gotten to use it a lot yet, but I want to see if it would work.
Inspired Nohem's real good at shooting that silent ring right off your finger.
I think out of those 3, Acidic Strike is one of. Yeah, I agree. I'd like to make it work in a deck. I just can't find space for it. It's one of those cards that's really good, but it doesn't do much for helping. Like, it doesn't do much for you as far as helping you do what you want to do. It's just stop
Yep.
Right.
your opponent from doing what they want to do, which isn't a bad choice, but you're kind of waiting for it to be useful when it's not always going to be the case. Command and Stride is, yeah, that's awesome. Like, that's just there's no arguing against that card. It's really good. It's, I focus more on the Mortex than Kainan is the only reason I don't have it. That's just a personal choice. Doesn't mean it's a good one. Lastly, Methodical Assault, I found was very feast or famine. I found very rarely did I get the choice that I was looking for at the time, and very often late game, if I drew it, my opponent was quite happy to give me 2 tithe counters and I didn't much to do with them. So I found it was almost a 50-50 in games whether it was actually useful or not. So that's why I didn't make it.
Fair.
Yep. That, and like I said, I think pretty much it's only good early game, and it can be really good early game, but yeah, late game you're never getting that extra attack. So
Yeah. Right. I guess the decision point there. With the one thing we haven't mentioned is that Kainan does have the spend tithe counters to get bonuses. So,
yeah,
I think they must have put that in there as a okay, like once you've got these tithe counters, like, and people if they're still handing them to you, like there needs to be some reason to have them. So, um, that
yeah.
when I've played, I more or less forget that this is even possible. But do you find yourself using the tithe counters on Kainan in any particular way more than others, or is it just dependent on the situation, Tommy?
It does depend on the situation, but what I found with playing them is catching your opponent off guard with that extra move is
Mm,
just hilarious. Everyone
Yeah.
counting 3 hexes from them, and then they think they're safe, and then I have to spend 2 tithe counters and I'm at 4 movement, and they're like, oh, okay. It'll be a thing that people just need to get used to from playing against Bone Reapers. It's probably just a kind of teething problem more than anything, but being in an
oh,
extra
that's a good
dice
term
one
for
is
it.
always awesome.
Yeah. Do you find yourself doing it pre-inspiration, spending them, or are you really kind of trying to hold on to them to inspire, or is it situation again?
Yeah, it depends how crucial the attack is. If the attack is
Hmm.
potentially going to turn the tide of the game in my favour, then yeah, I might need to sacrifice inspiring in order to do that. Um, yeah, it's just a balancing game with these guys. If you can get inspired
Sure.
before you start spending tithe, great. But if you wait
Yeah.
too long and start missing attacks because you're not willing to spend them beforehand, then it's not worth it.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, I guess worst case scenario, or not worst case scenario, but like you could spend them and just earn them right back with the right attack. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
are we going to upgrades here? Close out the.
I think we might as well.
All right.
And I think where we left off with tithe, actually, I think is a good place to start. So the tithe stone. What are your thoughts on this one, Tommy?
Best card in the game.
Best card in the game. Okay, good. Well, there we did it. We did it. We found the best card. Yeah, I can give a quick rundown. So, for folks who don't know, this is an upgrade that has to go on Kenta. At the end of the action phase, if Kenta is in another player's territory, that player has to make a choice. Either they give you a tithe counter, or they have to discard 1 glory point. So already that's pretty brutal. But then it also has a reaction where during a friendly Mortex range 1 or 2 attack action, before the attack roll, you can discard 1 tithe counter, and if you do, get +1 dice for that attack action. Other than that, it's the best card in the game. What are your thoughts?
It's just the tempo that it offers and the damage to your opponent's morale when you're just constantly adding dice onto your attacks from that one.
Yeah.
It's better than most people give it credit for because they think that they just see the one dice and then just end it at that. Obviously, your opponent's never going to discard a glory point; they're just going to give you tithe counters. So I don't see the point in that first bit. But the bit that's missed is how well it works with Netherite. So if you can get the ball rolling with that card, all of a sudden your Netherite is going to trigger a lot more often. So it can almost translate to +1 damage to all your Vortex attacks. in a way.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously,
right. Yeah.
The ideal situation, it's not always going to work like that, but that is the potential of it.
Yeah. For me, and I haven't played a ton with these guys, I keep forgetting that, and it doesn't speak well to my evaluation of them. I keep forgetting this is in there, and so like I'll just accidentally leave Kenta in like neutral territory, and then draw up this card, and be like, damn it, like, what do I do? So But yeah, very cool card. Very cool design. And it's that classic card where it's like give you an upgrade for a thing that the model actually has. You know, be it the Wretchling or the Tithe Stone or the the eel or whatever. So I got a little soft spot in my heart for those as well. Where do you want to go next here, Phil?
Well, we were just talking about how this pairs well with Nadirite, so I suppose we could talk about Empowered Nadirite, which is probably another one of the better upgrades in the game.
That's insane.
So this can go on Karu, Kenta, Noem, and Senna. So basically, it's all the Mortex with a Nadirite weapon. It gives +1 damage to their range 1 or 2 Nadirite attack actions and +1 dice to their Nadirite attack actions, which
Oh,
is whew, +1 dice and +1 damage you almost
yeah,
never see anywhere. And the
right.
fact that this is just always in play is, in my opinion, amazing. No matter who you're going to
Yeah,
put it on, it's always going to be good.
yeah. Hey, do you like Great Strength? Do you like Strength of Terror? Would you like them both on the same card?
Why
I think
not?
I will. I don't know how your use of this tends to go, Tommy. I really like putting this on Kenta just because he's got the reach too. Um, uh, but I don't know. What have you found?
It'll definitely get most of its value from Kenta. The only thing is with running Tithe Stone, there's a bit of a balance between if you want to make Kenta as big a target as that, or whether
Mm,
you can get away with
Right.
putting it on Karu. Because when it's on Karu's all of a sudden 3 smash, 3 damage, and knocking you back into
oof.
lethals. So he's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely has the most value if you can get it on Kenta for sure.
And I guess even Nohim gets inspired. All of a sudden, he's shooting a 4 smash bow shot.
Yeah.
What? So I
You'd
mean,
complete.
it's not ideal because you lose the damage part of it. But
Yeah.
with Netherite, maybe you get it back with your if you got a support. So
Just auto include. I think every one of these decks you build, you're gonna be bringing empowered Nadirite.
on the subject of damage bumps, Tommy, you've got Savage Strength, Great Strength. Phil, you've got Great Strength, Glory Seeker.
Correct.
So just sort of philosophical, Glory Seeker, I guess, helpful on Know Him, and doesn't have the downside of losing the defense die. But I guess, Tommy, you're just, why worry about defending when you just kill him in the first place? Is that the philosophy there?
Yeah, kind of. Oh, I'll be honest, I was having to practice a lot of games into Chris and his gets, and I probably just get a bit pissed off at the fact that Glory Seeker was.
Oh.
It definitely has a place in there, but it's it's whether you run something that's going to be good against any warband, or whether you run something that's probably going to be more useful against most.
Sure. How about since we were talking about how good the Mortex are, there's unnerving synchrony. We talked about that a little bit earlier already, but that's the reaction after an adjacent friendly Mortec attack action. Other than scything, the spider makes an attack action. I'm guessing the scything caveat is there. I mean, because you mighty swing or whatever, but just to keep weird things from happening. I don't know, but yeah, this is your route to extra attacks. Helps with the created for war, helps with you, like you were talking about the dream combo. So I don't know if there's much more to say on that, but pretty solid. I guess imagine you usually are trying to get this on the. Well, no, I guess so when I had played, I'd put this on Kenta, but I like what you're saying is you put it on one of the range 1 guys, use Kenta to trigger it with something else, and then they get to go again. That way you're not too stacked up all in one place.
Yeah, it just depends on the setup. It can be very strong on Know Him as well, since Know Him can have more targets to trigger off of. But yeah,
Sure.
it's the perfect name for it because it's synchrony. It makes created for war easier. It makes team effort easier. it
Mm.
works well with like obviously your netherite stuff and all that, and yeah, it's just another card that makes the rest of your cards work. If that makes
Sure.
sense.
Even more action efficiency coming from Primal Lunge as well, i.e., ready for dire chasm.
Yes.
Yeah, Primal Lunge is awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
again, it can trigger off Unnerved and Synchrony, but what I like to do with Primal Lunge is combine it. Well, I guess back to the gits thing. Try and get as many gits around them as I possibly can. Start siding, get the primacy field, start siding again.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Nice. I love it.
Sounds like you got something out for the gits.
They're annoying.
They're
Yeah, that
back.
2 dodge really, yeah, I'd had a match against them with the Reavers, and it was like, oh, 2 dodge, lucky. Like, I was like, these guys are so hard to kill. Not like me. Yeah. Uh, let's see. We got one difference here. I noticed you got Witchlight Glimmer in there, and that's a Mortec only. You will inspire and cannot be uninspired a fighter, and then you allow a reroll 1 dice in this fighter's attack rolls. This I don't think this was in the first version you sent. What landed you on this, and who does it usually go on, if or is it the usual situation
It's
dependent?
usually a Karu or Senna card,
Mm.
but it can go very well on Kenta, and just makes Kenta much more accurate, especially given Kenta cleave and a reroll. It's between Witchlight, sorry, Glimmer, and Discipline Charge. Those are 2 upgrades that make their way into the deck when I play against more defensive warbands, and then make their way out of the deck after I've practiced against easier to hit warbands. So they're not critical. I just find that I've got lots of access to damage and attacks, so just having a couple of extra cards just to make those attacks more accurate just works well for the warband.
Back when in the version that I had played that had Perfect Strike, all these many reroll cards in here end up being pretty handy for that, because it just helps you lock in the oops all successes sort of roll. So we talked a bunch about upgrades for the Mortex. There is one here that is Kainan exclusive, right? This is Hatred of the Living.
Yeah.
More rerolls, and then reaction during an attack action that targets this fighter before they deal damage. Reduce the damage characteristics of the attack by 1 to a minimum of 1, and then discard this card. Pretty rad. Like, rerolls on its own are fine, and then just having an extra. I mean, it's a little bit like a +1 wound in there. So,
yeah, I mean, why not combine a reroll with a kind of weaker tough and hide?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 smashes. You're a 50-50 on most attacks. So, in a lot of cases, Kainan can just be ignored by more defensive elites like your Banshees and whatnot. And you're taking the Banshees down. It's going to be mostly Kainan's job, since the Mortex most likely won't be able to get to them in time. So, giving them a reroll is just, it makes a huge difference as far as trying to get the glory train going early before they've just scored 20 glory for floating block hexes and objectives.
Yep.
Phil, you had Unstoppable Juggernaut in there.
Yeah. So I had Unstoppable Juggernaut and Great Fortitude basically for the same reason of just having more wounds, just to try and against warbands that don't hit more than 2 very often. Like, they'll maybe have 1 fighter that can hit really hard. I can just make somebody take a little bit more work to take down. And then Unstoppable Juggernaut just has the benefit of also having +1 move, which getting up to move 4 sometimes feels like a world of difference, just in where you can get on the field. And I feel like I often put this on Kenta just because +1 move with the extra reach makes an even bigger difference.
Yeah, it's definitely a good card. It's a good choice. I find because I'm running Eternal Chase and Never Falter that most of the time it would operate the same as a Great Fortitude. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's, it definitely has a place in the deck. It's just not one I've really tested, but I don't think it would make a huge difference to how I play. I could be wrong though.
Sure. Um, yeah, I think that about covers it. I guess there's Strength of Terror in there as well, but
Yeah.
um,
It's good. Take it if you have the space.
and yeah, this is a warband that between Kenta and Kainan, there's a reason to take Strength of Terror, burn the restricted on it over the augmented limbs, because the range 2 is a big deal. So,
For sure.
all right, well, that's all the way through the deck. Let's wrap it up with some general thoughts about them. So, Tommy, I hear you talking about playing against Banshees, Mollog, Gits a lot. I think those have been the examples that have come up the most frequently. Um, do you feel like what do you feel like? My impression is that the stand back Banshees are one of the more difficult matchups. Um, is that generally accurate? And then what are the beneficial matchups?
Yeah, I'd say any matchup that doesn't involve having to run towards your opponent for 2 rounds before you get to fight is fine. So
Okay,
Banshees are, yeah, they're a horrible matchup for these guys. It can still be done, but in most cases, nah, you're probably going to lose before the game's even started, unless you draw to
mm,
your movement tech really early. You get a
sure.
rebound, or you get a good kill with Kainan. And yeah,
It feels, yeah, I was gonna say, it feels like the kind of game that comes down to, like, I'm gonna have one early shot with Kainan that maybe I can trim to 50-50 or better if everything aligns, but and if that lands, then we got a game, and if it doesn't, now we're in a huge amount of trouble.
yeah, it's massively determined by how your deck comes out as well. If you draw your created for
Sure.
war and things like that too early, then yeah, you can forget about it. If on the other hand you draw as an opening hand against Banshee's team effort, walking masquerade and intimidating display, then yeah, you might be having a much better game.
Sure. Um, Phil, what do you got for thoughts here?
So in my experience, I playing these guys, I quickly came to the realization that while Kanan is great and it's awesome that he's in the warband, that the Mortex are the real stars of the show, and that you should definitely appreciate them a lot because they can do so much work, and some of them are almost just interchangeable. It's like, well, that one went down, we'll just start tooling up this other one instead, and they'll just keep coming at you. So I don't think we've ever really had a warband like that where it doesn't really matter who's doing what. They're all pretty good, and that they can all come and just chop you to pieces and be accurate and do damage, regardless of the fact that they're little 2 wound fighters.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's been so. Every so often, you'll see sort of combat horde war bands, but they don't often end up using weapons like the whatever amber bone or
yeah.
whatever the case may be. These guys don't need them. Have you ever had a build where you considered putting weapons in this? It just doesn't seem necessary. It seems like they've got it already in faction with their Netherite.
The only weapon I ever considered was Silent Sword, and that was just for early game catch out damage. But what I
Oh, sure.
tended to find was I could have got more value out of, say, Glory Seeker as an example. Um,
Mm.
Right.
so yeah, the weapons they didn't feel as if they were worthwhile running.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much value and then also upgrade benefit in the Naderite weapons that if you do take weapon upgrades, that you lose out on all of that. Um, So yeah, I've never really considered weapons. Silent Sword is an interesting take. I hadn't even considered that, but yeah, I don't see any of the weapons really outperforming the Nadirite. So yeah.
I think that about covers it. Are you running these guys heavy, or are you moving on to something else, Tommy, or is it
Honestly,
top secret?
I change warbands more than I change my underwear these days.
I
I probably played
mean, in the pandemic, who knows how often that is, huh?
yeah, I played these guys for about 20 to 30 games.
Oh wow.
I was looking forward to them, so yeah, I racked a
Nice.
lot of games out with them. And I found that they're incredibly good at annihilating the opponent, but incredibly bad into very certain matchups. So
Hmm,
I've been trying to kind of think about ways to get around that, but it seems to be that that's just the way it's going to be for them. It's the game as a whole. I find is getting a bit kind of rock paper scissorsy because warbands are getting so strong at what they do that it's really becoming matchup dependent whether you're going to win or not. And these
sure.
guys are
With
another example of that. The aggro potential they've got is just horrendously good, but
yeah,
they can just get wiped out in certain matchups.
fair enough. Um, so any path to the top tables, they might be relying on dodging a couple matchups on the way.
Yeah, for sure. I think
Yeah,
every warband is at the moment. The
has
wraith
got
creatures
that a
are
little bit. Yeah,
ridiculously strong. The wraith creatures are overpowered, I would say. But
yeah.
as I
All
saw
those
in
free
the
pushes.
as I saw in the German tournament, if you come up against Mollog, sometimes you just get squashed. There's nothing you can do.
I think that's Molog's MO.
Yeah, smash.
Sometimes you get the Molag, and sometimes the Molag gets you.
Yeah, oh, yeah, for sure.
For sure. So I guess one thing that I was curious about, because I couldn't quite figure where I wanted to put these guys. Where would you place them in the meta right now? Are they top tier, mid tier, somewhere in between? I mean, they're definitely not low tier.
Um, I'd probably put them at a B. They don't have the versatility to be A or above for me, but they're
Sure.
still very, very good. So yeah, I'd say they could win. They could easily win a Grand Clash, but it would be matchup dependent. They would need to get a wee bit lucky with who their opponents are.
Yeah. And well, this is somewhat dependent on what happens with season 5. I do think that they will fare well post rotation. So um, they, I think they will hold fairly steady in that place.
Mm. You don't feel like they're not reaching back to Beastgrave quite as much as some
Yeah. I
other
mean, they
factions.
don't run speed package, which is all going to basically be dead come rotation. They have a lot of really strong infection cards. Um, yeah, I think they will be solid aggro deck regardless of where we are rotation wise.
I agree with that. Yeah,
Cool.
All right.
Any other final thoughts before we wrap things up?
No, I think I'm good here.
yeah, I'm good. I think we covered it.
All right. Well, so that's been our review of Kanan's Reapers. Hopefully you liked it. We'll put my deck in the show notes. Tommy, are you cool with us linking your deck in the show notes as well?
Yeah, of course.
All right. So we'll have two
Okay.
decks there for you to pick from. If you'd like to get in touch with us, let us know about what you thought about this episode or any other thoughts that you've had listening to us or anything else you've just thought of while you've been messing around with this warband. You can reach us at WTHcast on Twitter or whatthehexcast at gmail.com. If you're interested in more Age of Sigmar content or anything more about like the Ossiarch Bone Reapers lore, feel free to check out that content over on our website, themortalrealms.com, for all of our other podcast content. Uh, Coming up in the future, we've got a pretty big backlog of stuff to get through. really, who knows? Anything between the starter set, some universal cards for some stuff. We got a new warband that's coming out very soon that we've got to review.
Get some fish reps in.
Yeah, I got to figure out how those guys are going to play. But yeah, so stay tuned. We'll have some stuff coming. I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, but thanks to GW for getting us a preview copy so we'd start reviewing these guys, checking out the models. I know, Davey, you were just saying before recording that these guys are pretty cool putting them together, and they were fun models to work with. So
yeah, the faction as a whole never super appealed to me, but then as I was putting them together, like these are pretty sweet. I was enjoying them a lot.
Nice. That's always nice when the models can bring you around to a faction that maybe wasn't your first choice.
Yeah.
And to wrap things up here, do you have a recommended listening for folks today, Davey?
I do. It's Death and Taxes. It's a single from Golden Days. And I wish I could take credit for thinking of that reference, but that's Phil's handiwork there.
That's mine. That one's been rattling around in my brain box for ever since we got these guys. I was like, oh, tithe counters, death taxes. Cool. For What the Hex, I've been Phil.
I've been Davey.
And I'm Tommy.
Which, actually, I think I made that kind of joke last episode. I'm really running out of material here. Sure. Watch a game and he was playing. So he sent me his. It's a Vanguard. I was just asking what I thought, but I was like, which one of you guys named your deck Boners? That's a. I was like, oh, neither. All right.
That sounds like Taylor.
Yeah. Oof.
Excuse me.
Do you want me to call for an ambulance?
Drinking some water while you commented about that deck name and kind of caught me off guard there a little bit. Excuse me.